Hello, my name is Justin Ney. I received my PhD in entomology from UC Riverside in 2006. Since that time, I've been working as an independent pest control advisor throughout the state of California. And in 2008, I formed my own business called Integral Ag, and I've been working as an independent since that time. In my opinion, integrated pest management is the backbone of the services that I provide. It provides the techniques, the science, and the math to help make informed decisions that will best help the grower meet their economical and sustainable goals for the short term and the long term. We utilize monitoring, traps, pheromone traps, caromone traps, weekly field inspections in order to gain knowledge and information about what pest populations are doing. And that way we can take some of that fear factor out of the decision making. When I was in school, I thought this was all worked out. The textbooks had it all figured out. I'd go out and start my work day. I'd count some insects, check some traps, and go talk to a grower and tell them everything's, it's here, it's black and white, it's time to spray. But it's often not a straightforward answer of when to treat and when not to treat. You have to take in a lot of factors. And that's why the integrated approach helps in many facets to accomplish that goal. It's still better than the alternative, even if I cannot collect the best information in a time allotted for my clients, for a farmer, because the alternative is to treat unknowingly or without good knowledge as to why you're treating. We have a motto of never spray just because, and that is in many companies that still exist. That is an unfortunate occurrence that still happens. A grower sees their neighbor spraying and they think it's time for them to spray, and often that is a big mistake because that neighbor saw his grower spraying, and it just runs down the line that they don't know exactly why they're doing what they're doing. And when you introduce broad spectrum insecticides into a field, you disrupt many different aspects of the farming operation, the least of which environmental and health hazards for people. Insecticides and pesticides tend to upset the balance of natural enemies, and you can often have secondary flare-ups of incidental pests that aren't normally economical problems. And when that happens, you might end up treating those pests, and then it just continues on in the pesticide treadmill as you follow one treatment with another treatment and another treatment. And in many situations, just reducing or removing that one spray may have long-term effects of reestablishing a balance that we unwittingly disrupted. But there are times when treatments are necessary, when herbicides, insecticides, fungicides are a requirement, and you want to use the best information available as to when those treatments should take place. And that's the backbone of my company and what we do for our clients, to collect information on a weekly basis, where we visit the ranch, visit the field sites every week, and collect data, record the data, and then have a conversation with the growers about what the implications of that are. A common thing that happens in the independent business is that the most difficult decision is the one not to spray. That is when you're forced to put your neck on the line and tell the grower it's going to be okay if they don't make an application. And when I get a new client, that's often a very difficult thing to accomplish, because they often feel that their previous program was effective. And perhaps they spray because it's Tuesday, March 15th, and now I might go in and tell them not to do that. Teaching a grower how they can use knowledge to reduce their fear and not to spray except when it's going to reach economically damaging levels is often a challenging thing to accomplish when you're getting a new client. And often I get phone calls from my clients that say, and the conversation is, oh, this neighbor I have is spraying for mites. And you told me that I didn't have mites. Can you please come check again and make sure I don't have mites? And more times than I can remember, I'll go back out, check the field again, not find any mites, tell my grower not to spray, and then go check his neighbors and then find out that they didn't have mites, but it was just time to spray mites because that's what they did every year since they've been in the business. So it's those kind of things that happen, and you continually have to educate and work with your clients, your growers, to maintain that belief and faith and trust that you're checking their fields, that you're inspecting what needs to be inspected to provide them with the most current and accurate information. And without that, you're making decisions that aren't necessarily the best for your grower. So some of the techniques that we utilize in our integrated pest management approach as an independent consultant, the most important is a weekly field inspection that we report back to our growers at the end of the day or the week about the status of their crop. That knowledge that you gain from checking traps, from inspecting the field, giving and providing that information in a written form to the grower allows you to have conversations about how to implement and to best tackle for the long term a specific problem. A very classic case that we still run into every year in the nut crops is mummy removal. And nut mummy removal, those are the nuts that remain on the tree after harvest. They become infested over the growing season with navel orangeworm. And they're very costly for growers to remove. And by going out and spending some time to investigate the field, to count the mummies, to look at the infestation rates, you can provide the grower with a reasonable risk assessment that they're going to face the following year and how they can best tackle that problem. And in the case of mummy nut removal, it's not by applying insecticides, it's by physically removing each individual mummy, which is often very cost effective, but in the long term, it will give them the greatest opportunity and chance to have better yields with less damage, so they'll see reduced losses when they get paid. There's other techniques that we employ in integrated pest management programs. Biological controls. I utilize most commonly conservation to try and leave refuges and harborage for natural enemies. It also means that there will be some pests in the field at all times. And some growers, that's not something they want to see because they've been burned. They remember the year when it blew up and it got really ugly. And so you have to convince them that having a sterile desert-like atmosphere in their orchards is not in the orchard's best long-term interest because the amount of inputs to maintain it are not sustainable in the long run. And so it's a continuing education process to reaffirm to the growers that you're going to watch those pests, keep those harborages around so that you can foster the natural enemies that are doing work behind the scenes every day, every night that you're not having to pay for. So often using reduced risk insecticides, pheromone dispensers, puffers for mating disruption, they don't disrupt the natural enemies and the balance as much as conventional broad spectrum insecticides, And so you end up with a situation where you have some pests, but the natural enemies out there are doing work for you every day to help keep them at lower levels. From my point of view, whenever I meet a new client and they ask me to come out and interview and look at their field, the first thing I do is I look at their overwintering pest problems. Their peach twig borer in the almonds, the scales in all the tree crops. And I can tell immediately at a ranch that's being overtreated because there will be no evidence of any pests at all. And immediately you can tell that grower that they can start using a reduced risk program and affirm to them that you're going to watch those populations over time and start saving them money immediately. So in summary, I think that integrated pest management, without it, my business would cease to exist, because there would be no reason, because we'd have to go back to calendar sprays. That would be just a spray at this time of the year because that's what we've always done. So integrated pest management creates the backbone for how we're going to proceed and move forward and make farming safer, more sustainable in the long run. And without it, we wouldn't be able to farm in California.